America is back.
It's been 100 days since Donald Trump's return to the White House, but it sure feels longer.
Donald Trump wants to rename the largest Gulf in the world, from the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
Trump signed an executive order calling for the U.S. to withdraw from the World Health Organization.
The president declaring a national emergency at the border and saying deportations will begin.
Donald Trump has announced sweeping tariffs on goods imported into the United States.
Cuba hasn't made many headlines because Trump hasn't said a word about the island. But this isn't necessarily a good sign for the Cuban people either in Cuba or in Florida. That's because Trump has essentially delegated Cuba policy to Marco Rubio and his right-hand man, fellow Cuban-American hardliner Mauricio Claver Caron. Under the media radar, they've been ramping up the US government's long-running war on Cuba.
In 2019, the policy was maximum pressure, but we never got to maximum pressure. We didn't even get to like 50% of maximum pressure. There's a whole bunch of stuff to go.
During his first term, Trump imposed maximum pressure sanctions aimed at regime change in Cuba. Just like this time around, Cuba policy back then was run by Rubio and Claver Caron.
La política de Estados Unidos de Trump hacia Cuba, que fue diseñada directamente por yo y que todavía sigue en vigor.
Esto es una política de presión máxima, en el cual tenemos el pie sobre el acelerador. Todas las semanas vamos a estar llevando a cabo nuevas medidas, no van a saber por dónde vienen, no van a saber, siempre va a ser una sorpresa y cuando piensen que tienen un poco de luz al fin del túnel, se les va a acabar esa luz.
Joe Biden largely embraced Trump's sanctions. Finally, in his last week in office, Biden took a few conciliatory steps toward Cuba, but these last-second moves didn't last long.
El presidente Donald Trump revirtió una decisión de la administración Biden de último minuto y regresó a Cuba a la lista de países patrocinadores del terrorismo.
When the US called Cuba a sponsor of terrorism, it cut the island off from international trade, credit, and investment. Rubio has been accusing Cuba of sponsoring terrorism for years.
There is zero doubt in my mind that they meet all the qualifications for being a state sponsor of terrorism.
Fact check, there's no credible evidence that Cuba sponsors terrorism. Trump also brought back Title III of the Helms-Burton Act, which allows U.S. citizens to sue companies doing business in Cuba.
La administración de Donald Trump le puso freno a los envíos de remesas desde Estados Unidos a Cuba.
Western Union says the move is because of a change of policy by the U.S. State Department.
All that was just the first week. Since then, much more has happened.
People in our country illegally can self-deport the easy way, or they can get deported the hard way.
But Trump isn't just targeting undocumented immigrants. He's going after those who entered legally.
President Donald Trump ends the humanitarian parole program and the CBP program.
The new order affects over 500,000 Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans.
At least 600,000 Cubans have arrived in the US in the past 4 years. More than 110,000 did so through Biden's humanitarian parole program. The program allowed citizens from Cuba and 3 other countries to enter the US for 2 years if they had a financial sponsor. But Trump decided to revoke their legal status as of April 24. He also revoked the migration status of everyone who arrived in the US through the CBP-1 online app, meaning pretty much every Cuban who has entered the US since 2022 was in danger. Cubans are the only major Latin American immigrant group to vote for Trump in majority numbers, but many now criticize his immigration policies.
Estas personas vinieron con su parol y no vinieron como criminales, sino como personas justas.
Tanta esperanza que uno tenía en traer la hija para acá, para que por lo menos disfrutara aquí lo que disfruta uno. Entonces eso es bien doloroso.
The Trump administration has also gone after Cuba's medical missions.
The doctors are not paid. They basically operate as forced labor in many places.
Cuban doctors go on these missions voluntarily and are paid many times more than they get in Cuba.
Gracias a las misiones que yo he tenido, mi calidad de vida ha mejorado. No solamente la mía, sino la de mis hijos.
Before Marco Rubio visited the Caribbean last month, he threatened to deny U.S. visas to foreign officials receiving Cuban doctors. Caribbean leaders have defied U.S. pressure.
We could not get through the pandemic without the Cuban nurses and the Cuban doctors. Then if the cost of it is the loss of my visa to the U.S., then so be it.
Meanwhile, Rubio's allies in Florida seem to be getting more extreme by the day.
We had a great time here, 4 hours here in my homeland of Cuba, the only really free spot in the entire island.
The irony of calling a notorious concentration camp the only free spot in Cuba seemed to escape Jimenez. Instead, Jimenez said he was inspired to impose more sanctions on Cuba. After the trip, he demanded Trump impose tariffs against countries taking in Cuban doctors, and he joined with Florida Senator Rick Scott to call for a total ban on travel to Cuba.
I don't think we should have any travel to Cuba. If you want to move back to Cuba, move back to Cuba.
A travel ban would hurt countless families in the United States and in Cuba.
Y mi familia no puede venir, me sentiría triste porque no la puedo ver más entonces.
Millones de familiares que están ahí no podrían venir a Cuba a visitar a sus familiares.
Sí, nos perjudicaría a todo el mundo, a los taxistas, a los que trabajan en el sector turismo, a la población, a todo el mundo, ¿entiendes?
The worst could be yet to come. The Cuban-American lobby hijacked Cuba policy 40 years ago. Now, they are directly calling the shots.